Chapter 23. "You say that this is your real home?" the brigadier said as they flew towards the Lacan. "A jungle full of wild beasts?" Anya laughed. "Not quite," she said. "In the middle, with rocky hills all round, it would be too much to call them mountains. There's a high valley which is just as Paracon used to be long ago. Oh, long before rapine, before there was any such thing as industry. And the only one of the original tribes never to have been conquered are living their lives there as they have done from the beginning. They call it Kimonia, Skyland. That's my home." "So," said the doctor, "I make for the centre." "No, we can't take the chance of leading the corporation there. You see, I'm not the only one to run away. There's well over 300 of us by now. I'm afraid we have to hide the car and go in on foot." "I'll take her down to the periphery then." Anya nodded. "If you keep on this course, you'll see a slightly bigger clearing surrounded by fruit trees." Sarah said, "Breakfast at last, eh, Jeremy?" Jeremy said, "My stomach's forgotten the meaning of the word." The voices were different now, hushed and gentle, coming near and going far, to be heard through the tides of pain, which also ebbed and flowed through her body and her mind. There was touch too, the gentle soothing of female fingers and the dry, firm male pressure on her brow. Or were they the touch of the same cool hand? And what of the faces? How could Katrin see once more and love anew the sweet lost face of her mother, and yet know it too as the crumpled face of a stranger? Then one morning when she opened her eyes and saw herself to be in a room, a hut, with unpainted wooden walls. A beam of sunlight was pushing its way past a roughly woven curtain, half looped back from an unglazed window, little more than an oblong hole. She seemed to be lying on a pile of skins and furs, which held her body in soft embrace, as though to reassure her that, yes, her pain was gone. On the other side of the small room, she could see the back of a small figure, a boy, or could it be a girl, sitting cross-legged, gazing out of the open door. Where was she? As though in response to her thought, or had she spoken, the figure leapt to its feet, and with the spring of youth in its step almost ran to her side. "You're awake, my daughter," said the little old man in a light, smiling voice. I... She couldn't find the words. "You have been away from us for a long time. Several times we thought we had lost you to the demons you have been fighting. But now you are back, and you are safe." Safe. As she tried to repeat the word, it grew in her throat and filled her whole being. The tears which had never come when Calden had been taken, nor since, were running down her face. She turned her head away, and wept as she had not wept for many years. She felt a light touch on her shoulder, and heard the murmur of his voice. "Weep, my daughter. Grieve for all that you have lost, for only by losing will you find." In a while, the racking, tearing sobs died away, leaving only the hiccuping gasps she recognized from childhood. With a long, shuddering sigh, she accepted with relief that the storm had blown away. She turned her head. The little man was back by the door, sitting as before, gazing out into the sunlight. Why did she feel that she had come home? She fell asleep. Jeremy was at last getting some breakfast. With the juice from the golden, sweet, sharp fruit spilling from every bite, he was at last able to quieten the demands of his importunate innards. He'd eaten 2 already. He swallowed the last lush piece of his third. "Yummy, aren't they?" he said to Sarah. Like a champagne cocktail." "I was about to say like a sherbet dip," she said, pulling out her handkerchief to wipe her mouth. He looked up at the twisted branches of the tree next to the one with the fizzy fruit. Hanging from them were rich red globes, even more plumped out with the promise of succulence. He reached out a hand. "I wonder what these are," he said. "No, stop!" He pulled back his hand as if it touched a live wire. Now what? More elder sister stuff? "For heaven's sake, Jeremy, don't you ever listen? They only look like fruit. Those are the sort of land jellyfish things that Anya said eat you up from the inside. He looked up at the Jezebel spheres in their tempting robes of scarlet. I don't think I like this place, he said. Waldo Rudley lay on his bed, trying to think his way through a realistic assessment of his position. Once the transmission needles had been implanted in his brain, his privacy would be gone. Although the Watchers would not be able to pick up his thoughts, they would know his every action as certainly as if they were in the room with him. So, if he were going to attempt an escape, the notion died almost before it had formed. Even if he managed to get out of his cell, maybe stealing his guard's uniform, there was no way he could bluff his way past the genetic identity scanners he would encounter at every level of the Entertainment's Division HQ. As he told Sarah, there had always been tales of unsuccessful hunts, where the quarry had escaped in the Lacan itself. But escaped to what? The life of a wild beast? There would be no way of crossing the waterless waste surrounding the forest. He gave up the riddle and allowed himself the luxury of thinking about the Outworlder girl. Never had he met a Paraconian who shared his views so completely. And as for her distress at what she had experienced, he visualized himself taking her in his arms and comforting her. He could almost feel her head resting against his chest. He shook his head, angry with himself at the fantasy and angry with a world which could offer such a hope only to snatch it back. He would never see her again, and the absolute certainty of that knowledge was more painful than the almost certain threat of death. Although Waldo was left with a short, sharp headache, the actual implantation of the transmission needles hardly hurt at all, in spite of the shaking hands of the technician who used the gun. Waldo felt quite sorry for him, having to operate under the cold gaze of Vice Chairman Tragan. There would have been little point in trying to resist. Better to die with the bullet of the hunter in his back than to suffer the tortuously slow ebbing of life he would have experienced as the paralyzed victim of a stun gun. Once they were left alone, Tragan explained that the hunt would, in fact, start that very day. "You seem surprised," he said. "You must understand that we in the Entertainment Division pride ourselves on our efficiency. Keeping people locked up is a needless expense. Until you are dead, you appear on the wrong side of the balance sheet, you see. A recorded hunt can be entered as an asset even before it is transmitted." Waldo said nothing. What was there to say? "You'll be given a small pack of rations, the same as the ones given to the hunter and his tracker, in fact. The chase has been known to last for several days. You'll wear the same protective clothing and regulation jungle boots. A large part of the enjoyment of our audience comes from the pretense that you have a chance." He looked at Waldo sharply. "That's why we encourage the rumors of escape in past hunts." "Thank you for your honesty, at least," said Waldo. Tragan turned back at the door. "I think you may regret your puritanical disregard of our transmissions. You might have learnt a lot. For instance, the vital importance of making your nighttime shelter a weeping draybush rather than a swarm of blood-sucking trigworms. They have a very similar appearance." Waldo smiled. "Yes, I am trying to scare you," said the vice-chairman, with some irritation in his voice for once, "and I have no doubt that I'm succeeding in spite of your bravado. How's the headache, by the way?" "It's quite gone," replied Waldo. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." No, said Tragan. "I should hate you to start our little game wanting to die. That comes at the end." Sarah sat on a fallen tree, keeping an eye on the guzzling Jeremy, and thought about Waldo. Presumably, Anya meant that it might be possible to rescue him from the hunt itself. Was she in love? She'd been in love before, but this was somehow different. She just liked thinking about him, the way you couldn't stop thinking of a cheese and pickle sandwich when you hadn't eaten for yonks and was stuck on a story. She grinned at the thought, and the image came up of his back view as he led her out of the clutches of Tragan. There was no question of it. She preferred men with small bums. Oh, for heaven's sake! Now she was not only writing clichés, she was a walking, talking cliché herself. And how superficial could you get thinking about a bum, no matter how elegantly shaped, and when its owner was in mortal danger? Pushing her tangle of emotions to one side for consideration later, she gazed across the clearing to the small group by the camouflaged fly car. The doctor seemed to be stroking Anya's paralysed arm. Or was it more like a laying on of hands? Pleased that her attention had been diverted, she got up and went over. "The stun gun blocked the energy flow, you see," the doctor was saying, "so we have to reverse the effect." "Reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, eh, Doctor?" said the Brigadier. "You may mock Lethbridge, Stewart," answered the doctor. "I know as well as you do that the expression would sound like nonsense to a classical subatomic physicist. Well, now I'm reversing the pseudo-polarity of the metaphorical synapses in Anya's putative energy channels. And that's just as nonsensical and just as effective." Sarah hadn't a clue what he was talking about. "I haven't a clue what you're talking about," said the Brigadier. Good, thought Sarah. She wasn't the only simpleton around. "Oh, but I know exactly what he means," said Anya with a laugh. "It might be my old teacher talking." "Thank you, Doctor," she added, flexing her arm. "Look, it's completely better." "Well, bless my soul," said the Brigadier, as Jeremy wandered up, wearing the air of worried concentration of a small boy who had just added a bag of chips to his stomach already containing 2 ice lollies, a hot dog, a portion of candy floss, and a mini pizza. Before they could set off, Anya produced a small black box with a couple of wires coming out of it. She told them that they all had to be deactivated in case any of them had ER transmission needles implanted in their brains. "The needles are made of a biocompatible organic polymer which is biodisposed of by the body within a relatively short time," she said. "This merely speeds up the process." "But we know quite well that we haven't been, tampered with," said the Brigadier. "You wouldn't necessarily remember having an implantation," replied Anya. "But if you had, you could lead them straight to Skyland. We daren't take the risk. Have any of you been alone with Vice Chairman Tragan or any of his people?" "I'd rather not think about it," said Sarah. "Just hold these electrodes to your temples." "Will it hurt?" "Not a bit." Sarah followed instructions. There was a faint hum from the box. She didn't feel a thing. "Who's next?" The doctor moved forward as Jeremy, with a polite "Excuse me," retired behind a handy bush. The silence of the desert, only made more intense by the distant calling of the jungle birds, was marred by 2 alien noises: the repeated hum of the deactivator and the sound of Jeremy throwing up.